Hey guys, it's Kate and I hope you're having a great day. I have a confession to make, and that is I have never used Master's Touch watercolor paper. So I've had Artist Loft on this channel, I've used Canson and different cellulose based watercolor papers, but I was actually at Hobby Lobby one day. I actually went to Michael's first and there was absolutely no parking at their location. So I ended up going over to Hobby Lobby and they had a 40% off sale. So you can see this one here is 15 sheets, 8 by 8 inches or 20 by 20 centimeters. It's 140-pound cold press acid-free watercolor paper, but this is wood pulp and not cotton like I normally work on, but I do enjoy using cellulose paper. And regular price, this was about $7, but I got it for 40% off. So I figured I would grab it and do some test painting and kind of show you how it works. I just went ahead and picked it up and I got a few different pads. This one is 8 by 8 and I thought it might be kind of fun to work on a square. So opening this up, I did tape the bottom just to get my painting started, but looking at the paper, it kind of has a similar texture to Artist Loft, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but I'm going to hold it up. Maybe I can get my hand on there and increase the focus. So I'll just see if we can see that, but you'll be able to see the texture more when I start painting too. So first, I'm going to do a few little tests on here with my brushes, and then we're going to do a painting together. So I'm working with my Marie's Masters watercolors. My palette is already moist, and I'm just going to go grab one of these colors. I'll do cadmium red to start with, and I'm just going to make some lines and marks on my paper and just see how color goes down. And that's kind of nice. It seems to have a pretty even spread. I'm going to try with another brush as well. Okay, I've got my quill brush. I'm just going to get that moist. And I'm going to do the same thing. Well, I like how the color goes down. Now, if I do wet in wet, let's see how that works. I just kind of lightly rinsed my brush. I'm just going to kind of paint a little blob here and get it moist, and I'm going to pick a different color. I'm going to grab some Prussian blue here and I'm just going to drop that in, and it seems to spread out pretty nice. Let's see what a stroke might look like. Okay, and then next let's try to do a little bit of a galaxy type of deal. So I'm just going to go in here with my brush and I'm going to pick up some more of that Prussian blue and just kind of dab that in here, just like that. And maybe I'll go into my purple red and I'll just mix it right in here, get a nicer purple color, and come back in here and add that. And see how those blend together wet and wet. Maybe I'll even add some, what do we want to add? How about this brilliant purple? That's a nice dark color. Ooh, that spreads nicely. All right. So that's wet and wet. Now let's see about a light wash. And I'm not even trying hard with this, but we'll see. We'll see how that dries. It's fairly even, but I just want to get this done quickly. Let's do a blended wash. So I'm going to start off with this blue. And then I'm going to go back into the purple. And see how that goes. Now I'm doing pretty wet. This is already starting to kind of have some tendrils in here. I'm going to come back in with the blue to try to avoid some of that cauliflower effect, but I may have some of that backwash going on in here because it wasn't really that wet. Let's let this dry and come right back. Okay, our first layer is dry, and I'm going to give you a quick close-up. Overall, as far as paper warping, you can see there's a slight warp, but honestly, it's not really different than any other paper I've ever used that is 140-pound paper. Even my cotton papers, they have slight warping, and usually if I kind of lay it flat somewhere and put something on top of it, it flattens out just fine. So you know, there is a slight warp you can see after it dries. And where I have added this water here, I'm going to give you a close-up. There is that slight sort of backwash type of thing going on where you have that cauliflower, but it's not as pronounced as I've seen on some other cellulose papers. So you have that, and then there's almost this really beautiful tendril or feathering that kind of happens when you're working wet and wet, and it dried just really nicely. I love how that looked, and you can kind of see some of that feathering action happening here where you've got some of that orange and the blue mixing together, and it was just some orange that was left over on my brush after rinsing. Sorry, the cadmium red. And then here on this first stroke, you can see where I had some extra pigment and water on my brush here, and so you can see a little bit of extra texture where that dried. But overall, it dried pretty well, and I actually really love this effect right here that happened. I love that cloudy, feathery look, but that's something to keep in mind whether or not you're going for that. That seems to be the natural way. It kind of spreads out on the paper after you lay down your paint. So now that this is dry, I'm going to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to take my clean brush. This is actually a scrubber brush, and I'm going to dip it in water and blot it off, and I'm going to try to scrub up some color. And I'm going to go for this dark area so we can see, but I've got a damp brush, and I'm just going to come in here and scrub, and I'm going to rinse my brush very well, blot it again, and come back in and scrub it. And you can get some pretty clean paint removal there. I'm going to come in with a paper towel and just blot that up, and we can see the finished result, which it does lift pretty cleanly. You can see that little bit of that paint left over, but it does have a good lift if that is what you're looking for with your painting. Now I'm going to see if I just take some water and dab it on my paper. Let me make sure I actually got some water on my paper. Doesn't look like I did. All right, there we go. All right, I've dabbed 4 little dots of water on here. I'm going to let that sit for a second and then blot that and see how that lifts. Meanwhile, I'm going to try a glaze. So I'm going to come in just to some of this color that I've got here. I'm going to reactivate it with my brush, and let me add a little bit more color to that. And let's try to do a little glazing stroke here. And I'm just going to put one straight down this way. And maybe I'll grab some of this darker purple too, and we'll do a dark glaze and see how that dries. Okay, while that's drying, I'm going to bring in my paper towel again and blot those dots. And so you get some lift there, like you might expect. It's not quite as pronounced as scrubbing the paper. Now I have scrubbed pretty well with this brush, but you can see the paper has stayed intact. I don't have any pilling or anything like that. But let me actually see how long it might actually take for this paper to pill. So I've got some of that blue and purple mix with my scrubby brush, and this is a pretty firm brush tip. It's definitely it is a scrubby brush. So I'm going to just sort of rub at this and see how long it takes to get some paper pilling. And looks like I do have some happening. You can see those little dark spots with pilling slightly. And I'm sure if I kept working at it, it would just happen more. Now, if I don't use a scrubby brush, let's see what happens then. So I've got my quill brush. I'm going to make a similar mark with this other leftover paint, and I'm just going to start scrubbing with this. And it seems to be holding up better. That scrub brush is very firm. And I don't really have any pilling yet with this, and I'm just sort of rubbing it back and forth, and this paper is wet. You can see the dots of water my brush is leaving behind. But I still don't have any pilling. So you really, I think, need a pretty firm brush, but you could work at this paper for a while. You can see I still have pretty clean paper. Let me see. I don't know if you can see that in the camera, and it's just not happening here. It's just spreading nicely, although there was pilling with my firmer brush. And let me see about scrubbing off a paint layer here with a damp brush, because you might get a little bit of a lighter effect without using the scrubby brush. And it does seem to be lifting, and it's sort of halfway in between the plain water drops that we dabbed up and the scrubby brush, and it's a little bit softer on the edges too, just because of the type of brush that it is. So you can kind of play around with your brushes and see what works best for you on this paper. And for those glaze layers, these are all dry. So let me give you a close-up of that as well. So that is the glazing effect. And it does glaze pretty cleanly, and it dries nice. It doesn't really lift up the paint underneath, which is a good thing, because who wants to do a second layer and pull up the first layer at the same time? Not me, I know that. So I'm going to put this aside and start on my next painting. Okay, hopefully you don't hear too much of a lawnmower in the background, but I'm going to start a painting, a little abstract on this sheet. So I'm going to start, I have the bottom and the top taped, but not the sides. And it is attached to the pad up here, but I'm just going to put on a similar border top and bottom, and it's propped up a little on this little book about that thick. So I have gravity working for me, and I'm going to work very wet and wet on this. And so I'm just going to wet my paper and kind of go over it loosely with my brush and add some more up here. I want to put a bit of a wash on, but I want it to be nice and moist. And so I'm just being liberal with my water, and I may also add some more. Okay, so I'm going to dip into this raw sienna, and I'm going to grab some water here and really go to town in this color and get a nice wet mixture going on. And I'm just going to kind of put it right in here and let it be blotchy and start flowing down the page. I'm going to have a bit of variation here going from dark to light. So I'm going to give this a little bit of a spray, dip into my water my palette down a little bit, and just let it go and flow down here to the bottom. I'm going to get my whole page covered. Just like that. And where I have some parts maybe a little bit too strong, I'm just going to kind of come in and do some blots with my brush. just like that. And it's going to kind of have a cloudy look to it. Okay, I'm dry to the touch. I'm actually going to go into my black and bring some of that out into my mixing pan. And I'm going to go also into my indigo and just add a slight bluish tone to it. And I'm going to water this down pretty good and start with kind of a light wash. I'm going to put some hills here. Let me just see how it looks on paper. That's pretty light. Maybe I'll add just a little bit more water. Okay. Now I'm going to come in here with my brush and start here at the edge. And I'm going to bring this down. Just like this. I'm going to come in, just kind of make some mountains here. And I'm going to get this very watery and spread out here. Just like that. And then I'm going to come back into that indigo, strengthen that a bit, and I'm going to kind of dab some here at the top and let that spread down into the rest of the area down below. And I'm still letting gravity work for me, but I'm dipping into the pan and getting some nice dark color here. And I'm doing this hopefully pretty quickly while this is still pretty wet. I'm just kind of dabbing my brush right here on the page and letting gravity do the work. And I'm just going to continue adding some more color here. And I might even bring that down a little bit more. I'm going to kind of spray this a bit. Okay, I'm going to tilt this up and keep that wetness going. Just like this. And I'm just dipping into what I had left over on my palette. And I may get some cauliflowering here, but that's okay. I don't really mind the texture. I'm just going to kind of run my brush across the bottom and let that kind of pool there, and I'm going to just brush it across and dab it. All right, we're back and I'm dry. I'm going to go back into this black, and I'm going to go in with my quill brush this time because I like having the choice to use a finer tip. So I'm going to go back into the black and mix a very dark, rich color. I'm also going to add that indigo back into it and keep with that dark theme here. And so we're going to add a third layer here. And I'm kind of going to add a bit of a, almost like an outcropping, like this. And we're going to come down here and we're going to fill this in. And I'm just going to make sure to get a lot of good color on here and fill it in quickly. And then I'm going to come straight in and I'm going to start dropping that in to the top. I'm going to add a little bit more water to get some better flow, but I want it to be nice and dark. And so I'm going to dot this along that top edge and let that flow down into my painting, just like that. And I'm going to even tilt it, let gravity do its thing. I'm going to dot some more kind of on these little outcroppings here, just to get that nice and dark. I'm going to go back into this indigo and just really get that dark. And I'm just going to kind of sweep up and let my water flow back down like this. And that way I get some even coverage. And then I'm going to grab my bristle brush right here and just do some light brush marks up, almost like grass. It'll add some texture to the top of that area, and I'll kind of go higher in some spots, just like that. Then I'm going to grab my rigger brush and go back in again to that black and the indigo, and keeping it really nice and dark, and add a little bit of water so I can spread it. And I'm just kind of mixing it up here so it will definitely saturate my brush. And I'm going to come in here and start building a tree. And I'm going to let it kind of go out into my sky area. And with tree branches, you can get some very random branches. It doesn't have to be, anything uniform. And in fact, the more random you have it, the cooler your tree will end up being. At least that's what I find with my paintings. And you can vary your widths, have your branches facing in different areas, change direction, all of that type of stuff. It doesn't have to be solid. Maybe I'll just kind of trail off in that direction and down over here. And I'm just going to kind of fill this out like that. And I'm going to keep my general tree shape, but I'm going to vary my thicknesses, vary the placement of my lines, and I'm going to keep it kind of thicker down here toward the bottom. And I might even have another branch kind of coming up right through here and crossing paths, just like that. And I'll kind of fill it out with some wispy marks, just like that. Right. I'm just going to make sure this goes right in down here. I'm going to add some more of that darkness along the top. Grab my bristle brush again and just lightly give it some brushes. Now I'm going to go into my alizarin crimson and also a bit of this purple red. And you're not going to be able to tell the purple red very much, but it'll just add a little bit of extra toning to this crimson. And I'm also going to dip into just a little bit of sap green. And then I'm going to come over here and add some texture with splashes, just like that. Now I'm going to take my spray bottle And I'm not going to hold it close to the paper. I'm going to mist it gently from further away. And I'm also going to protect this area a little bit that's still wet. But what I'm trying to do is activate a little bit of that red that I just dropped onto the paper. And just let it spread out and be a little bit wet and wet. Maybe a little bit closer. How's that? Just like that. While that's wet, I'm going to lay this flat so it doesn't start flowing down into the rest of my painting. And matter of fact, I'm going to hold it upside down for a minute. And while that's wet, I'm going to dip back into my red and add some more saturated color in a few areas. And I'm just going to use my brush to kind of drop that right in, like so. And I'm just going to let wicking action kind of take it off my brush and make that color richer. Just like this. And I'm going to follow the general direction of my branches that I put out so that it kind of adds some interest here at the edges, but I'm going to allow some of these to just kind of come out sort of wispy. And we're going to have stronger color than other places in some spots. And it'll kind of add almost like its own shadow and highlight in a way. At least that's what I'm aiming for here. Just like that. And I really love how this looks. This is very abstract. You get that pop of color. I'm going to let this dry and then come back in and deepen up some areas even more, but I just want to see how this sort of ends up once it finishes moving. So I'll see you in a second. I am mostly dry, and I'm just taking a quick moment to come in and go over just a couple of these branches to darken them up again. I don't mind the rest of them being pretty wispy because I was kind of going for that where we would have a nice blended effect, but I'm just going to reinforce a couple of these so that it has a little bit more of a 3D effect. And I'm just going to sort of be strategic. I'm going to come down here and add a couple of more of those branches there. And I might even come out like this and just add some more branches overall to this area here. Like that. The top is getting closer to being dry. I'm going to come back in to my black and my indigo, and I'm going to add some more here to darken that up with another coat. And I'm just going to make it a quick coat of paint just so that we can have more of that contrast. And it's just going to be a quick flat coat of paint. Okay. Now I'm going to go back into my alizarin crimson and get that a nice mixture. Might even take some of this black in here that I just have along the edge. Just like that. And it'll just add a little bit of darkness to it. And I'm going to come back in here and I'm still going to do my brush dots, but I'm going to just kind of make more concentrated areas with some flowers. So it'll be kind of following along with some of these branches, and I'm going to be kind of strategic, a little bit sparing, but getting some deeper color in some spots, just like this. And I'm just dotting my brush, almost scumbling. And I'm putting it over some of the spots where I already have some color. And I might make some of these a little bit more bushy. My cat got into the window, which is right behind me, and she's kind of messing with the curtain. So if it sort of changes color, that's why. She's, I guess, up for the day. Okay. Last but not least, I'm going to add a couple of more random splashes here. Just like that. You know what? I've got kind of a branch there that goes nowhere, so I'm going to add a little bit to that branch too. And maybe add a few little spots down here. Okay, I've got my tape off. We have ourselves a completed painting. I really enjoyed using this Master's Touch paper, and I might actually like it a little bit better than Artist Loft. I really like this blendy color here, and that's one of the reasons why I did that wet and wet with the red, because I really love that wispy look. And so I love the abstract here, the way we did it together. And of course, it's not realistic, obviously, but I just love how it looks, how it turned out, the darkness with the light and the contrast and adding the red. So I'm going to show you a close-up, and it's still a little damp, but it's mostly dry. So you can see how the color went down on the paper. You can see my second coat there, actually my third coat of the darkness. And then these sort of background mountains. And I got, for as wet as I was putting wet and everything, I got just really no cauliflowering. So here is another close-up of the glazing and all of the things we did on this sheet. And you can see there, but this was very enjoyable to work with. So I'm excited to play more with this paper. I got a couple different pad sizes, so you'll be seeing it in some more videos. So if you live near a Hobby Lobby and you want to try this paper out, it's pretty inexpensive. And so go and grab one for yourself and play around with it with your watercolors. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you like this video and subscribe if you want to see more like this. And until next time, keep creating. Bye.